Welcome. Take It Up with Jessica Lee. I'm here with Jack Marshall, who's the VP of Customer Success at Prevoty.
Correct. And Prevoty was recently acquired by Imperva.
Yes.
So now I'm at Imperva.
Okay, but so you're responsible for the renewals of Imperva subscription also.
Correct. I do all the customer success for Prevoty, and it's been kept kind of separate for a little while, but we're getting it merged in slowly. And I'm also in charge of renewals at Imperva.
Right. So
Imperva sales.
We're talking about $174 million of responsibility there.
It's a lot of renewals.
Yes, yes. So I know customer success is a fascinating area because with the subscription economy, you have a lot more importance now in this role.
Yeah.
More pressure.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I stumbled into this role, and I remember when I first started at Fortify, my title was given to me as VP of Customer Success. And I was like, Customer Success? Oh, okay. What's that? Because my job there was really just to take the product, the first version of the product, and get it installed at the first customer. And I got it up and running there. We got some other customers, and we kind of grew the company from there. But nowadays, customer success is everywhere, and it's because of subscriptions. When you can walk away at the end of the year or have to pay the same amount of money as you did the year before, it's real easy to just walk away. Whereas if you pay a perpetual license, that's a lot of money, and you're going to stick with it for a while, even if it's not working. But if it's not working in a subscription model, go try something else for a year, and you always come back next year.
Yes, so you keep on having to earn that relationship.
It's changed things. And there was no customer success software companies 15 years ago. Now there's a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
It's gotten to be a real big market, and I kind of just fell into it, to be honest.
And you love it.
Yeah, I do like it, and it's because you almost you get to do a bunch of different aspects of things, right? It's very, very technical, especially when you're doing deployments and bringing out new technology to the market, because you're the one working with the customer, and then you work with engineering to get fixes done and get bugs fixed and features added. So you got this very technical loop, but you're also got this business aspect of it too, right? You got to get the renewal done, you got to get the payment done, and you want to expand.
That's right.
Especially if you're in a certain type of market like we are with Prevoty. We have really big customers, and you get a little foothold in there, make that successful, and then you can expand from there.
Okay, tell me about the product then.
Well, what Prevoty does, it's called a RAS product, which is it's an application security. And what it does is when you have an application and it launches in the application server, like WebSphere or WebLogic, something like that, it will insert into the binary WebSphere or WebLogic as inputs come in. And if it sees a malicious input, like something a hacker would be doing, it'll stop it. And it's a great place to do it. Instead of watching what hacker would be doing, it'll input. You're right there. It's calling the database, and you can say, hey, you know exactly what's going in the database. It's unencrypted. It has to be by definition. And so you can see it and see what it's going to do and determine whether it's an attack or not.
Okay.
It's the place to be to stop an attack, because you got the context of the application. You know the user, you got session information. It's all right there.
So what trends are you seeing in the industry with the whole security? It's a lot more significant now with so many devices.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's gotten so complicated out there, and there's so many controls, and I don't know if you listen to Gartner or some of these other people, if you want to be fully protected, you would need something like 30 or 40 different controls. You got your antivirus, you got your analytics engine, you got a SIM, you got vulnerability scanning, you got all these different things. And I think the trend is going to move away from there as certain technologies kind of displace all those disparate solutions. And I really think the trend is going towards a zero trust network. Kind of what Google did in their One Corp initiative. They created a zero trust network. And a zero trust network, in theory, you don't need firewalls or anything, because you don't trust anything. And you verify everything. Now, that's a lot harder to implement than it sounds. In theory, it sounds very good, but implementing it is very difficult. But there's some, I know of a very large stock exchange in Europe that for their trading platform, they built their own zero trust network, because they just decided that's all, it was so important to their business. They couldn't allow anything to happen to it, and so they built their own zero trust network. Took them years, and it's all kind of pieced together and takes a bunch of people to maintain. But I kind of think that's where the world's going, is that zero trust. You look at what Palo Alto Networks is doing these days, a lot of zero trust stuff in their new initiatives, and it's mainly for segmenting certain areas of the network. We're going to segment this, and we're not going to trust anything, and we'll build this segment, and once you get through the segment, we'll trust it. Mm-hmm. But I think eventually it's going to grow, those segments will get smaller and smaller until every device, every service, every resource is at zero trust.
And then there's the cloud security, with more application now is cloud-based.
Yeah, and that's creating a lot of disruption as well, because as businesses move to the cloud, things change dramatically, right? If you own your own stuff and you have your own data, that's one thing. You can quote unquote protect it and that kind of stuff. But when it goes up to the cloud, now it's in somebody else's data center, and you have to either trust it or you have to put your own controls in there. And in reality, you end up doing both. Mm-hmm. But you also run into all these privacy things. If you got your data in your own data center, and your data center is in a building that you own, it doesn't travel anywhere. But if it's up on the in the cloud, you might travel across country borders, and then you have different privacy. Like Europe, GDPR is different than the US. Yes. And so if you have somebody's social security number transmit from Europe to the US, and you don't have that properly protected, then you're violating the
yes.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. So it's getting very complicated, and all the old big box solutions that were in people's network operation center, they don't move to the cloud. You can't send your box to Amazon. They got their own boxes, and you can't even get access to certain components of the network at Amazon. Like it used to be looking at IDS, intrusion detection. That's where you're looking at the line and you're seeing if you've got certain bits flowing through it that match patterns that are malicious, right? Like a snort or something, one of those tools will do. You don't even have access to that network layer at Amazon, so you can't see the bits that are flying around. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole different deal, and I think they can do some neat things at a place like Amazon, because they see all the traffic coming in for like DDoS and that type of stuff, but it's you don't have the same kind of access that you had when you control your own network. So it's changed a lot. And it's all software based there. Obviously, there's no hardware. And so that's changing things, because there's a lot of these security companies that have been shipping boxes for years, and that business is changing.
But Imperva has both on-prem and also cloud-based.
They do. And, Imperva has been around for a little while, and they've got a huge installed base of on-prem boxes and software, but they have a really good cloud offering, and they're migrating customers to the cloud. And one of the neatest things that Imperva has done is they created a thing called Flex Protect. Because imagine you're a company and you got like 50 boxes all over the world, and then you want to get to the cloud. But there's a difference between theory and reality, right? In theory, you want to be in the cloud, but in reality, it's going to take you a while to get there. And so this Flex Protect, you can purchase that, and you can move this one today, you can move this one in 6 months, you can move this one in a year, because the license is flexible.
I see.
And so they're moving their customers to the cloud at the speed that the customer wants to move.
Right, the phased approach.
Yeah, it's a neat offering.
Yeah.
And then Prevoty fits into that, because Prevoty is just software. It's just a little jar file in the case of Java that you drop on the machine. So you can put that into your applications on the cloud, literally in a minute, and you have them there, and your apps are protected. And if you're in a DevOps mode, where you're constantly spinning up new instances of your application, when you're in a build mode, that works perfect, because you just put it into a Docker container or whatever system you're using, Kubernetes or whatever, and it's just there. It's part of the build. It's with every app. There's nothing. You can really install it, and once it's running, you don't have to think about it again.
Do you find that in customer success, you got the enterprise base that's different, and then the SMB is different? So do you have different strategies to help them?
Yes, you have to. It's the enterprise customers. get a different level of service than the SMBs. And it's not really so much a different level of service. It's more you do a one-to-many at the SMB level. And, you know, an Alienbot was sold to the SMB market, and you got thousands of customers, and they're not that large. And so the way you talk to them and make sure that they're running is different. You got to automate it. You got to have a highly automated system so you can find out who's having an issue, who's having a problem, who's not using the software. Whereas when you're selling to the enterprise, you can have business reviews with the leaders and ensure that you're meeting those business drivers, ensure that things are getting deployed. I can take one of my people and send them to an enterprise customer and just stay there for a week or two and make sure everything works. But you can't do that to a small customer. And so you got an issue of detecting that there's an issue, and then you got to correct the issue.
Okay, so what KPIs are you tracking?
It's very simple. Renewal rates, expansion rates, and NPS score.
Okay.
That's all we do is we get people to renew, get people to expand, and get people to say nice things about us.
And how are you doing those fronts?
Well, I think we do pretty good. There's room for improvement for sure. And there are challenges at a company the size of Imperva because you got everything from the small SMBs to huge enterprises.
Right.
And so you got all those challenges. And there is this, you got to have communication with the customers. And when you have on-premise software, it's hard to get the feedback. If you have a SaaS system, it's easy to get that feedback. And so Imperva has a big SaaS system for all the cloud customers, and then they have the on-prem. And so you got this environment where you get really good feedback for the customers here, and you can't get good feedback for the on-premise customers. And so that's another reason we want to move them. The customer wants to move to the cloud for all the obvious reasons. We want them in the cloud because we can service them better when they're in the cloud.
Okay, so what are you excited about achieving then, given this kind of transition?
Well, I really want to make sure that Prevoty it turns out to be a really good acquisition for Imperva. So we're very anxious to get more and more customers buying Prevoty, and we're getting Prevoty to talk to the Imperva. You know, Prevoty doesn't have a dashboard, but Imperva's got a great dashboard. So that's a pretty easy integration to do. But there's also a thing when, if you look at a network, you got Imperva here on the outside, and then you got, Imperva also has a database monitoring product. So you got a database monitoring product, you got a firewall on the outside, you got a database monitoring product, and with Prevoty, you're inside the application, which gives you that session information. So if somebody is taking data from the database, the data monitoring product, it can see that. It can see the data coming in, data coming out, but it doesn't know who it is. Now with Prevoty, since we got session information, we know exactly who that is. So you tie it together, you can actually follow a user from when they come in, all the things they do, and when they leave. So you've got that complete history of that customer, and you know who the customer is. This will tell you, you know, the IP address that it's coming from. Prevoty will tell you who the user is. So I think that's a very powerful combination. It was one of the things that drove the acquisition.
Excellent.
So.
But you must have some challenges, right?
The challenges that I have are on the Prevoty side. It's new technology, and so you have to explain it to everybody. When you get a new customer, the sales guys have done probably a good job, you know, explaining to people. They've done a POV and they've tested it. But now you got to go in and get it installed and get it running. And then you got to have a success there because you want to spread to all the development groups. And if you have a bad experience at one development group, the first development group, all the other developers are going to know about it. And when the security team calls up and said, "Hey, I'd like you to try this Prevoty thing," they're going to like, "Oh no, I heard about that. Sorry, I got real deadlines." And it's hard because it's kind of endemic of the security business in general. But the security team buys these controls, and then other teams have to implement them and use them. And so that creates problems because the people who buy it and the people who are going to be deploying it, you don't even know if they've been getting along for the last 10 years. As a matter of fact, you know, security teams aren't welcomed with open arms all the time because they come in and slow things down. And the development team, it's features and deadlines, features and deadlines. That's their mantra. That's what how they get their bonuses. And so if something is going to come in and slow them down, they're really hesitant to spend the time and resources on it.
Right.
And I'm sure they've had security systems that have not worked. For instance, they may have done static analysis to look for vulnerabilities or done dynamic analysis to look for vulnerabilities. And those things generate just mountains of false positives.
Yes.
And so, I remember back in the early Fortify days, we scanned somebody's code base. We found something like 120,000 vulnerabilities, literally. And I sat down with the guy. We spent about an hour looking at the first one, and it was a SQL injection, and we finally determined it was a false positive. And he looks at me, he goes like, okay, well, that took about an hour. I got 120,000 more of these. So it's going to take me about 5 lifetimes working 24 hours a day to get through them all.
That's ridiculous.
That's not going to work. And Prevoty doesn't find vulnerabilities. It fixes vulnerabilities. And that's what's kind of neat about it. Everybody's got stacks and stacks of vulnerabilities in their vulnerability management program. But in putting Prevoty on, you fix those vulnerabilities. And the number one reason customers buy Prevoty is so that they can change the SLA on a vulnerability. Most companies will have an SLA. If they find a P1 vulnerability, they have maybe 2 weeks to fix it. And so the development team has to drop everything they're doing and go fix that vulnerability. Well, if you have Prevoty, that P1 will become a P3, and you might have 9 months to fix that vulnerability. So once you get that message into the development team's head, then they're a lot more receptive to your message.
Well, I'm sure there are people listening now that will take a look at your solution.
Oh, good. We hope so. And another thing it does, the other real big value driver for it is if you have it installed and then there's a CVE released, you don't have to go patch anything or do anything, because the way Prevoty works is when an input comes in, it'll analyze how that is going to execute. So it's not being compared to patterns. It watches how that, it analyzes how a SQL statement, for instance, will execute. And if it determines that it's malicious, it'll stop it. And so you don't have to update patterns when a new CVE is released. And if you look at the Equifax, that was the big one a couple of years ago. That was a vulnerability in the Struts framework, which is an open source software package that everybody uses. It's been out there for 10, 12 years, and it had that huge vulnerability in it. And so companies that use Struts, and everybody has Struts, companies that use it all had to drop everything they were doing and go find every instance that they had of Struts and patch the vulnerability. And I remember when that happened, people were going like, God, I don't even know how many applications we have that have Struts. Because, if you're not recording that, and most people don't even know all the applications that they have. A company like a big telco will have maybe 10,000 applications, and some of them were written 10 years ago and nobody knows what's even in them because the people that wrote them are long gone or on other projects and stuff like that.
So your product can go automatically find it and fix it?
Well, if you had Prevoty running, you didn't have to do anything because it would have stopped the Equifax breach. It out of the box. It's called a 0-day, right? Prevoty will protect from a 0-day attack.
Excellent.
And that's a big relief for the development team and the security team, because if a new CVE is released, and they are every 6 months or so, a new one comes out that's really dangerous, and then you don't have to do anything. Otherwise, you got this huge fire drill that you got to go through.
Good. Well, thanks for sharing all of that, Jack.
Oh, you bet. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for sharing with us and the audience too.
Well, thank you.
There you have it. Take it up with Jessica Lee.